Bizarre Brain Comics. Hello, my comic book friends, and welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I am Gerry, your host. This is where I like to take a look at some older comics, talk a little bit about the characters and creators, and examine the stories and the art. And this time I want to take a look at the story going on in here. Detective Comics, numbers 463 and 464 from 1976, written by Gerry Conway, drawn by Ernie Chua, or Ernie Chan. At this point he was still Chua, and inked by Frank McLaughlin. I talked about Ernie Chan before. He was a Filipino artist, had been come to the U.S. in the early 70s. He had the name Chua from a typo error on his birth certificate, so he was Chua. When he became a citizen in 76, 77, somewhere in there, a U.S. citizen, he got his name changed on his birth certificate and took back his correct name of Chan. And of course, we talked about Gerry Conway, who had written virtually everything by everybody. But one of the biggest things that I know him for was a stint he did on Marvel's Conan the Barbarian. But he wrote so much. And I like this period in the Bronze Age with Batman. It was darker, more realistic than it had been, of course, before. But the stories were a little bit more cohesive, not as long like in this here. It's a two-parter, but it really is long enough to have been just all in one issue, if it hadn't been for a backup story that they also have in Detective Comics. But I have no problem with that. And it's a decent, self-contained story. And I kind of like it. But what I want to talk about here, of course, is the inker, Frank McLaughlin. Is from 1935 to 2020, so we only lost him just a few years ago. Yeah, 35 to 2020. So he was, 85 years old? Probably 84. And he was born Francis X. McLaughlin, an American comic book artist, and co-creator of Judo Master over at Charlton. And I like the Judo Master. I don't have a whole lot. I eventually want to cover him as well. But so there we have his artwork to compare. And he drew the Gil Thorpe syndicated comic strip for a time, and he assisted on both Brenda Starr and the Heart of Juliet Jones strips, for example of more regular people type stories. What I mean by regular people, of course, not the costume kind. And by an assistant, I think he was probably as an inker. He worked primarily as an inker, and he wrote and illustrated books on cartooning and comics. I'd like to find those. I saw them listed, some listed, when I looked it up, but I don't think I've ever seen those books before. And he also worked on Justice League of America on Dick Dillon's pencils. He inked the cover to the beautiful and iconic Tomb of Dracula cover #1. Yes, that extremely iconic cover. Tomb of Dracula. It's where Dracula's standing there, holding the fainted woman in his arms, with a castle in the background, and surrounded by the fog and mists of the marsh or forest in the night. Very beautiful, and some excellent inking work on that to convey that feeling. We'll have a look at that at another time. And he did some inking over Ditko's pencils, Steve Ditko's, on Captain Atom. And he inked the classic Carmine Infantino cover to the storyline The Flash of Two Worlds, as well as a whole host of other stuff. So he was a fine artist in his own right, and did some great and iconic inking jobs. Now, so here he is inking Ernie Chen's pencils, which I think works well. Now, I do really like Ernie Chen's work, but I really am not terribly thrilled with his interpretation of Batman, insofar as I think he makes him too big and bulky. And but otherwise, his storytelling is great. And Ernie Chan's style is just usually overpowering. And I think McLaughlin kind of reined Ernie's style in a little bit, making him a little bit more conventional for the costumed characters, as opposed to his barbarian and horror work and stuff like that. So I think it worked fairly well there. And okay, here you can see the two covers of these two issues, inked by Ernie, drawn by Ernie Chan. And as you can see, they're both very dynamic, eye-catching. And this being Detective Comics, I like this design on the masthead title. For Detective, that's very distinctive. And this introduces a one-off villain character, but I kind of like him, and I have to think it may very well be inspired by Spider-Man. It's like, what if Batman versus Spider-Man type thing. But if he is, he's a combination of Spider-Man and the Punisher. Okay, and let's I'll try to go through here fairly quickly. It's because here we have Catching Death Web. Bats doing his batty thing, stopping catching criminals. Here's at some kind of buyout drug deal, whatever it is, and Bats happens to take a glancing bullet, and one of the lead bad guys takes off. See, I like this because it's kind of street level. And I kind of like that with Batman. Nothing against the supervillains, but with Batman, I don't like him as quite as big, and I like the more detective aspect of Batman. So here is Bat's taking off after this one guy who's trying to get away, and kablooey gets in his car, and he is blown to smithereens. And then here's Gordon and them at the scene, and the one guy, who is he? The new DA, whoever I don't know who he is, blames Batman for it, thinks Batman did it, and because he really doesn't like Batman, and Gordon kind of goes to bat for him and has his injury looked at. He gets home. This is when Batman was not working out of the Batcave at the mansion. He gets home, gets patched up, and he goes back out because he's got to get some info. Talks to some of his CIs, gets a little bit of info. Goes to talk to somebody, and they jump him, and he cleans house because these are some of the bad guys. And then Bluey, while Bats is there talking to him, somebody takes out that bad guy, that gangster. So Bats is after him and sees the guy in the costume, reveals himself to be the Black Spider, and actually manages to eventually, they fight, and ads. I missed a page or two. Gets to the next place because he's delayed because of his injury, and here they are, some big gangster coming into Gotham on this flight, and Black Spider is there, and Bats tries to intercept him because it turns out this bad guy is killing a bunch of other bad guys, like a hitman. And here we're coming up to the cliffhanger. Bats is stunned, and he's on the runway with a plane coming in to land. Dun, dun, dun! Which takes us right into this one. The splash page on this one. There's Bats. Uh-oh. Doomsday Express. And Bats manages to avoid the tires of that incoming aircraft and gets to intercept the Black Spider before he can shoot the guy. And here we have flashback telling us what has happened before. So Bats is trying to catch the guy, trying to stop him from killing him, but Batman is still weakened and stunned by his injury. And this guy is a pretty good fighter, and Batman just is not up to snuff. He thinks he's gotten the gun away from the guy. Thinks he's okay, saved him. The bad guy, the gangster, gets on the air stairs, and he's got a hidden gun in his costume. This is kind of dopey though. And kablooey takes out that gangster, and then he takes off. And Bats is lamenting because Black Spider says he was inspired in part by Batman. So they should be working together to take out all these bad guys. But, of course, his idea of taking out the bad guys is taking them out permanently, which is not Batman's way. And he's given little details into his background throughout the story here. Something for Bats to go on. Something about a friend of his who was a junkie and led to some deaths and regret and this other stuff. So again, Batman is out talking to someone. Here we have a lovely lady who happens to be a streetwalker, and gets some info from her about a particular guy who matches the description. He'd spent some time in prison, yada yada yada. Matches the description of the story that Black Spider was talking about. And then while he's talking with Commissioner Gordon, gets a call. It's basically a challenge. A challenge to the bats on this elevated train. So it gets to that elevated train, and there they are. He said, "There's a bomb. It's going to take out some bad people. It doesn't care about the innocent people that would be taken out with him, and fight. And Bats gets the better of the guy. Manages to take off his mask. Yes, as he thought. He is the very junkie of whom he spoke of earlier. It wasn't a friend. And they fight, and let's see if I can get them. There we go. The guy's trying to plant the bomb. He gets knocked off the train, and as he falls, the bomb goes off. Kablooey! And that is the end of the Black Spider. And all's well, but there, of course, is the regret that Batman did not want it to end this way. Didn't want the guy to die. He just wanted to stop him and mete out law and order style justice. Now, these issues of Detective had backup stories. Now, this is a Black Canary backup story. This issue had a backup story of the Atom, but the stories were continued. It's drawn by Mike Grell and Terry Austin, and written by Bob and Laurie Rozakis. But the main characters are different, but it's the same storyline. Going from one, and it's the story about the villain, the Calculator, and it goes from one character to the other character, which is kind of an interesting way to do a backup. Instead of having the same character all the time, you got the same storyline for different characters. And this is some of the fairly early Mike Grell. I think this was before he was doing the Legion of Superhero stuff, and well before he started with his Warlord. Froggy in my throat. So that is our Batman story in Detective Comics. Now, one thing I like is the detective aspect of it, because he's supposed to be the world's greatest detective, and quite often in the comics and other things, the detective aspect is lost in the story, and that's how he started. He was as a detective, and a nice, fun, action-packed adventure that is more or less all self-contained into these 2 issues. So please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Do you like Ernie Chan's work on Batman here in this run on Detective Comics? He's a good artist, but do you like him? What is your favorite period of the Batman? I really like this period through the 70s and 80s, and more detective aspect, more grim stuff. What about you? Do you want just all the big flashy villains, or the cosmic aspects? I was never thrilled with Batman involved in the cosmic stuff, except with some reservations with the Justice League, but not all the time. I liked him better as an occasional part of the Justice League, not always the Justice League, because that's just not his style. So thank you for joining me. Like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to leave those comments, people, because I want to know what you think of the Batman and these creators. Remember, comics are art.